This weekend, I got to see the new movie that everyone on Earth will be talking about, Deadpool and Wolverine. And I don't know if you guys know this, but Deadpool 3 has been getting, well, quite a bit of hype. After saying the MCU is so over, then so back, then so over, then so back, people are now saying, for real this time, the MCU is back. And is it? Was Deadpool's long-awaited sequel worth the wait? Was the return of Hugh Jackman filled with every wet dream a fan could think of? Did I see every cameo a man could hope for? Nah. Sorry, this movie is good, solid, fun, cute, but not great. Never exceeding the expectations I had for it going in. And before anyone says that my own hype is to blame, no it's not. I wasn't hyped for this. If you don't believe me, watch my old videos where I talk about how I have no strong thoughts on the Deadpool movies. But all that said, if you've been keeping track of my personality, I am still a comic book fan, and I did have quite a bit of fun with this movie. It is not the worst thing ever, nor is it the second coming of Christ. It is a third, less hyperbolic thing. So before we dive into my issues with the film, I'd like to sing some praises of it first. First, it is funny. It might be the Deadpool movie that made me laugh the most times, and the first third of the movie is honestly paced really well and had me on board. The first two Deadpools have a tradition of really good opening credits, and I'm glad to say that this one keeps that tradition going. It's not that the humor is necessarily better than previous Deadpools, but to me it managed to step away from having Deadpool only talk about penises and butts and farts. Also, Ryan Reynolds is still very good as this character. I can't picture anyone else, and when I read Deadpool, I hear his voice. The only other character that happens for is Batman, where I always hear Kevin Conroy, so that's a pretty good metric of the guy's impact. Another thing I really did like about this movie was the length. It clocks in at just about 2 hours, and while that does contribute to some of the issues I had with the film, I really would have expected this movie to shoot for the moon and want an extra half hour to cram in a cameo from, I don't know, Cloud Galactus. Additionally, the costumes look pretty good. It's no spoiler to say that Hugh does wear the cowl at some point in this movie, and man does it complete the look. But also, Deadpool himself looks really good as well. They made the red a lot more vibrant, and as I've always praised these movies for doing, Wade wears the mask for the majority of the movie. There's one scene in particular that's a pretty emotional beat in the film that Wade keeps his mask on during. That kind of self-restraint is just not seen in these modern superhero blockbusters. Alright, enough about Deadpool. What about the other half of the title? Don't kill me, don't kill me! Listen, please, I promise I'm a Wolverine fan. Look, see? I really like the guy. In fact, I love the guy. In another universe, I'm Mrs. James Howlett.
The best there is in what I do. And what I do is smash oranges.
But I don't think that Hugh was at his best in this movie. We have seen Hugh Jackman many times as this character, in great movies and in terrible movies. We have seen the absolute heights of his achievements as Wolverine, but I'm sorry, this outing just blended in with the mass of his other performances. I'd love to say that Hugh brought new energy to the character, that they totally justified bringing him back, but I don't think any of that is true. He's good in this movie. He's about as good as he is in any X-Men movie that's not Logan or Days of Future Past. Those two outings as Logan, to me, are the heights of his entire career as Wolverine. This does kinda just feel like he's here for fan service, and I don't think this story couldn't have been told without him. On the one hand, it's nice that he didn't totally steal the spotlight in Deadpool's movie. On the other, did we really need to bring him back at all? All of this gets at bigger issues with the MCU and nerd culture in general, but as you'll find out in an upcoming video of mine, this issue is kind of worse here than it was in a movie like No Way Home. In No Way Home, at the very least, we got some closure on these versions of Spider-Man. and we got a peek into those worlds that we had left behind decades ago. But here, we're following around a Wolverine that we don't know, and the movie doesn't exactly do a great job of establishing him as a character independent from the X-Men films. They still rely on our prior knowledge of the X-Men films, of Professor X, of Magneto, of Storm and Scott. This guy didn't have an X-23, but I'm still expected to feel emotions when he talks to her. Yes, they didn't technically resurrect Logan, but is this really much better? Functionally, it's exactly the same idea. Because of Marvel's variant and multiverse obsession, the next time a character dies, we can just pluck a new one from any universe to replace them. Death is now meaningless. You might say, but comics do that all the time. It's only fair that movies do too. No, guys, this might be hard to hear, but movies and comics are different. One of the great things about the MCU when it started was the idea that things could end, that we could have the end of Iron Man, the end of Steve Rogers, unlike the comics that kill and resurrect heroes every 15 minutes. And I love comics, I think that's fine for them to do, but the MCU was a chance for movies to be a different experience from the comics. Instead of moving forward, the MCU is constantly looking back. Is this what we want? To constantly relive the glory days? To drag out the same actors all the time so we can be reminded of what Marvel was like when it was peak? Honestly, is this what you want? I hate the idea that every casting needs to be permanent. Yes, I do think new actors should play characters. I do want a new Wolverine. I do want a new Spider-Man. I want films to try new things, not just force feed me things they already know I like. Why am I going on such a tirade about this? Oh fuck! Sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent there. The point here is that his performance was exactly what I was expecting. And hey, I love Hugh as Wolverine. Do not for a second think that I'm a hater, but again, this does feel like an example of, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Was Hugh's inclusion seamless and organic? No. It was fun, but not at all a requirement. To pivot to some other gripes I had about the film, this plot is insanely thin. I'm not a person who cares about this sort of thing. I think criticizing plot holes is a waste of time, but still, this shit just barely makes sense. And another thing is that this movie keeps making jokes about how stupid the MCU multiverse saga is, but then it's also doing a lot of those things that it's criticizing. Like, just because you're being self-aware doesn't change the fact that you are contributing to the very problem you're criticizing. As such, it is unfortunately pretty ugly a lot of the time. In my last Deadpool video, I talked about how, oddly enough, Deadpool 2 visually looks real good. This does not. It is that very generic Marvel look and feel, like the Marvels, like Ant-Man 3. I'm not saying there's no good visuals in the entire movie, but we gotta judge it from the sum of its parts, and the sum of its parts is pretty ugly and gray. The action pops off a few times, 2 fights in particular, but other times feels a bit hokey and over-stylized. Remember how the first Kingsman had that unique style of hand-to-hand fighting? And then it got old? It's a lot of that style of action, when every action sequence is shot and edited so intensely that none of them stand out or feel that important. They do like a one-take action scene at one point, but I couldn't even focus on it because it was just so nothing. My last major complaint is that Deadpool's entire supporting cast is pushed to the sidelines. It's not like they were the main focus of the previous films, but Vanessa, Colossus, Dopinder, Blind Al, and Negasonic really felt like important parts of Wade's life. In this movie, his entire motivation is based off of his love for all of them, but we never get to see any of them interact in this movie, with each other or with Wade. I know the focus here is on Deadpool and his relationship with Wolverine, but you gotta put a little bit more into your own supporting characters and not get so caught up in this whirlwind of being in the MCU. And although I praised the runtime earlier, one negative side effect of the runtime is that we have to absolutely bowl through all the emotional moments. They try to do some emotional stakes with Wade and Vanessa, or with Hugh, but the scenes are never long enough to make a lasting impact on the audience. One other thing I do want to touch on that's positive is, oddly enough, the cameos. Cameos get such a bad rap these days because they can be done so poorly. In fact, sometimes they can be done really poorly. With movies like The Flash, Multiverse of Madness, it's easy to write cameos off as a trap that movies like this often fall into. But with this one, I thought they actually used all their cameos quite well. Yeah, some of them are super quick jokes, but this is Deadpool we're talking about, so I don't really care. Others of them actually have a decent role in the larger story and help flesh out the world this movie is building. In fact, maybe it's sacrilegious of me to say, but I kinda think this movie should have had more cameos, because thematically, with what the movie ends up going for, it would make sense to have a lot more. I actually like the cameos here. One especially had me absolutely rolling. At the end of the day, that's what this guy is all about, right? I can sit here pouting about how the MCU isn't doing what I want it to, but it's not about me. It never was. If you loved Deadpool and Wolverine, that's awesome. I'm genuinely happy that this will increase people's love for these characters and hopefully increase their willingness to go and enjoy other types of Deadpool and Wolverine stories. Not every story is going to appeal to every person, and that's okay. I have gotten great things out of the MCU, and hopefully there will still be great things that I get out of it. But that does not mean that I'm ever going to stop criticizing it, because I do love it, because I think it can be better. I did not go into Deadpool and Wolverine wanting to dislike it. I didn't dislike it. But maybe the movies that would have appealed to me more at one point in my life won't appeal to me as much now. That's fine. It's not about me. It never was. But what did you think of Deadpool and Wolverine? Do you like the direction that the MCU is headed in? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you don't hate me too much for my opinions, be sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned for more stuff. They made Wade less ugly though, right? Like, I don't even buy it anymore when the movie calls him ugly, because it's pretty much just bald Ryan Reynolds.
Whose balls did I have to fondle to get my very own movie? I can't tell you, but it does rhyme with Wolverine. And let me tell you, he's got a nice pair of smooth criminals down under. Anyway...